Today I wanted to show you guys a repair that I'm getting ready to do on Dave's very favorite, most well-loved sweater. So I've actually already done a little bit of repair work. The neck edge of this sweater had started to unravel and I'd fixed it several times, and finally the yarn around the neck edge was so far gone that I couldn't just keep using the same yarn to make the repair. And so I actually chose a contrast color a couple of years ago and took out the last few rows that were fraying on the neck edge, put those stitches back on the needle, and then bound off again with the contrast color yarn. And he wore it for another year or two, and now it has developed 2 additional holes. This sweater I made for him, it's at least 8 years old. It may be more like 9 or 10 years old. And Dave is not notoriously very gentle to his clothing anyway, so the fact that it has lasted this long is pretty impressive. But there is a fairly large hole right here. The reason that it is so large is because it was one strand of yarn that got caught and actually cut through on something, but then I haven't fixed it and he has continued to wear it, and so it's frayed out and gotten even larger. And then the same thing has happened a second time here. He caught the sleeve of it on something else not that long ago, so that he's got a second hole here. And he loves this sweater, so I really do want to fix it so that he can continue to wear it, but unfortunately I don't have any more of the green yarn that it's made from. So there's going to be a little bit more extensive surgery because I need some more yarn to fix these 2 holes. So what I'm actually going to do is I do have some more of the contrast gray that I used for the neckline. I'm actually going to be cannibalizing some of the yarn from the cuff down here at the very bottom of the sweater. I'm going to be cutting the bind off, removing the bind off, unraveling the seed stitch border that I have on here, and then I will have that yarn that I will be able to use to repair the 2 holes, and I will put the same gray bind off. I will actually do the ribbing, or I will do ribbing. I've never been super thrilled with the seed stitch. It just flips up as he's wearing it and it bugs me. So I will take this opportunity to lengthen the sweater a little bit, put a little bit longer section of gray ribbing at the bottom, and then I'll be able to fix those holes invisibly with the green. So I wanted to take you guys through actually fixing the holes and unraveling the bind off edge. So stay tuned. I'm going to show you guys how I take out the bottom band so that I can reuse this yarn to mend those holes, and I will replace the cuff of the bottom of the sweater here with a different contrast color yarn. So what I like to do, I don't like to try to find the end that I wove in and unweave it. I just find that it doesn't make it easier to try to do that. And I also think the very, very bottom, the bind off edge, probably has enough wear and tear that I don't really want to reuse that yarn. So I'm actually going to find one single strand, and I like to use something as a pointer to pull that up a little bit easier. Take that one single strand, and I'm just going to cut. With scissors, I like to have pulled the yarn up enough so that I know that I'm just cutting one strand. I cut through that, and now I'm going to unlace. This will be a little bit time-consuming to get started, so I want to walk you through the process until I've got it well established and started so that you can really see what's going on. So I'm going to undo a little bit in one direction where you actually need to kind of trace the yarn through to get it to go, and I'm going to pull on that to see if I'm to the point where it will just unravel itself, and it is not going to do that on that side. And I will do the same thing on the other side. I will unravel just a couple of stitches to see if I get to that point again. And again, it does not look as though I am. It's important to try to go from both directions because knitting is directional, and if it doesn't unravel from one way, it may well unravel from the other way, because ideally I do not want to unravel this entire band one stitch at a time. That's painfully slow and not what I want to do. I don't remember if I knit this sweater from the neck down or the bottom up, And that does matter quite a bit because of how easy it will be to unravel. It does not look like I knit this sweater from the bottom or from the top down. If I had, when I get to this point, I should be able to pull the yarn and have the whole thing just unravel apart. Since it's not doing that, and because I can see the as I am undoing this, I'm not getting standard loops of knitting. So both of those pieces of information tell me that I must have started this from the bottom. So this was actually my cast on edge. And so what I would have to do to take this out is I would truly have to stitch by stitch unlace it for the entire thing. So not just for the cast on, but all the way up. Because knitting is directional, you can't start from the cast on edge and pull and have it pop the stitches open. You're actually going to have to come about this a little bit of a different way. To do that, I am actually going to cut farther up here, cut this stitch, unlace the piece from the top. That will create my live stitches, and it will mean that I will be able to unravel this here a lot easier to do. So I will show you that part. So now that I have a better understanding of the construction that I used for this sweater, it had been long enough since I'd made it, I'd forgotten that I'd started at the bottom instead of starting at the top. So this means in order to unlace this bottom section, I'm going to need to come about it a little bit differently. I'm actually going to need to start above the area that I want to remove. And so I'm just going to grab one strand. So I'm going right from where it transitions from the stockinette stitch of the body to the seed stitch of the band. I'm going to go right in there and pull just that one strand. I really like to use a needle or something to separate the strand of yarn so that I don't accidentally cut through more than I intended to. And I'm going to cut that one string, and I'm going to start unlacing. So a lot of times you're going to have to poke around a little bit to see how this starts to work. And now, as I begin to unlace, and again, it may take a little bit of practice if you haven't done this before to really understand the structure of the knitting to figure out what string to pull to make this unlace. But you'll see as I do this, now we're starting to get things that look a lot more identifiable as knit stitches. So you've got these live loops are appearing. These are what we'll put back on our needle when we've unlaced all the way around to join our contrast color to reknit the bottom band. And so I'm truly just going to unlace all the way around the sweater. And you can go from one side or the other. They unlace both exactly the same way, but it does take a little bit of time. And through the magic of video editing, I have gone ahead and unlaced all the way around the bottom of the sweater now. It took me about 15 minutes to unlace everything. I just thought it might be a little bit boring for you to watch all of those steps. And I am now right at the very, very end of the unlacing. As you unlace, your yarn that you're pulling through gets really long, and you can just go, went ahead and just cut that short again every once in a while so that I wasn't trying to pull through a very, very long strand of yarn. This particular sweater was actually seamed, and so when I got to the side seam, I cut the seam open so that I could unlace all the way to the very edge. And this is my last few stitches here. Things do often get a little trickier right at the very edge. You kind of have to poke and prod a little bit more to figure out where to get the extra strand through, but you get right to the end. And this is actually one of the yarns that I wove in when I was weaving the ends in from my piece. So this strand that is right here is not the yarn that is used for the actual sweater. This was just a strand that I wove in when I was finished, so I'm going to cut this there. And that totally removes, so I've completely removed the bottom band of the sweater. And I've got actually two separate bands, one from the front of the sweater and one from the back of the sweater. So those are completely removed, and I've got these live stitches all the way around the entire base of the sweater. The next step for me is going to be to put these live stitches back on the needles. And so to do that, you just take these live stitches and you just put your needle through them. This does take just a little while because there's so many of them in an adult size sweater. And when I go ahead and put the base, the bottom band on this sweater again in the contrast color, I'm actually going to do it in the round rather than in two pieces to sew a seam closed. So I'm going to get a little bit creative as I go across to this gap. When I cut and undid the seam, I went a little bit past where I needed to. So there's going to be a little bit of creativity to get these stitches back on the needles. But I will keep you updated with my progress once I have got everything back on the needles and I'm working on the bottom band. And then in another video later, I will show you how I actually fix those two holes. So stay tuned.